Welcome back to Hipsterless Hangout, special episode.
Episode 7, correct?
Yeah, we're kind of doing a reaction and just we're not talking about a specific movie. We're just gonna get on here and talk about the recent death of Rob Reiner, one of the classic Hollywood directors, and we're just gonna talk about that for a little bit. We haven't really talked about what we're gonna talk about actually.
So we did record the fourth floor previously. I decided for my own reasons, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to my own presentation and delivery, that we're going to re-record that one at a later point. But in the meantime, on I believe it was December 14th, and I was having a bit of a time feeling sorry for my own circumstances. And then I happened to hear that a Hollywood legend and his wife, let's not discount that it was his wife as well, were discovered by their own daughter, no less, or he was. He didn't know at the time that her mother had been murdered too. But Hollywood legend Rob Reiner, he is the director of The Princess Bride and When Harry Met Sally. Those are two of my favorite movies. I know that I say that often, but they are. I have many favorite movies, and those would be two of them for very different reasons. He allegedly he was murdered, but allegedly, of course, it's too soon for there to have been a trial and much less a conviction. But apparently, his son, Nick, who seems like the biggest douche I've ever listened to from different interviews he's given, was arrested for the murder of his parents. So, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's really shocking. It's very strange and surreal. It's also one of these weird things where you have a man who's almost 80. I believe he was 79, and his son was pretty old in his late 30s, and it seems like oftentimes that's kind of the more unexpected situation. It seems like a volatile youth would be more likely to kill somebody, not somebody who's like near middle age, right? And then you just don't expect to see like a quite elderly man get murdered, of all the ways to die at that age. It seems pretty far down the list of likeliness, but especially then you take into account Hollywood royalty and people who have money, people who have status, people who have success. Like you were saying right before we started recording, all the money in the world, all the success in the world doesn't seem to make a difference in these cases. It can insulate you and it can give you access to things and it can protect you to a degree, but in the end, you're just as vulnerable as anyone else.
It's so strange, because it's surreal to me at this point. And the last really surreal experience was actually not that long ago. It was the Palisades fire, which nuked a bunch of not just elite people's homes, but a lot of them were elite as well. A lot of them were celebrities. And I'm referring to the Pacific Palisades fire in Southern
Mm-hmm.
California, which began on January 7th, 2025, and continued until the end of the month before being fully contained. And a lot of people who were very successful and wealthy lost their businesses, they lost their homes, they lost their personal possessions. And it was just a surreal experience, um, having observed from afar, because I live in Mexico, but I lived all of my adult life in Southern California. Rob Reiner, did he live in Hollywood or Beverly Hills? Which specific area did he
Oh,
live
geez. Let's
in?
see if it says. Oh, it says Los Angeles home. So I'm not sure exactly where. So, by the way, okay, so he was 78 and they lived in Brentwood. So that's kind of the northern area of Los Angeles County, like out beyond the hills in the suburbs, kind of.
Brentwood is right next to, it's kind of between the Palisades and Hollywood Hills. It's basically one of those elite areas, so I'm
Hmm.
enough with it. That's where Nicole Simpson lived, actually, and she got murdered in much the same way. What is it with these just, I'm sorry, these sadistic killings? I mean, they're so unexpected, and I don't want to discredit the fact that heinous circumstances can happen to anybody, but somehow when they happen to a Nicole Brown Simpson or a Rob Reiner and his wife, people who come from affluency and live in gated communities, and you would just think that they're immune or at least much less susceptible to those types of
Hmm.
atrocities, but evidently not. Nick Reiner, by the way, is 32, not 39. Or he's
Okay.
38 or 39. He's 32, but even so, he's no spring chicken anymore. And he had been dealing with a lot of drug related issues for basically the entirety of his youth and extending up until his 20s and early 30s. Obviously, he had been in and out of, I think he said about 18 rehabs, all funded for and paid by his parents, of course. He also made a movie with his father called Being Charlie. Did you ever see it?
No, no, I didn't. I've never even heard of it. And yeah, we will go through the filmography at some point here during this episode. Did you see it?
No, that's not
Okay.
really my bag of tricks, so no interest there. I think I had heard the title. It has kind of a catchy title, so it sounded and sounds relatively familiar. What is it like to be Charlie? Who is Charlie? And so I think I had heard it in passing at some point, but did not see it and don't plan to. But from the interviews that Nick and Rob gave together, Rob is apparently trying very hard to give his son credit and really talk him up. And I don't want to say flatter him, but alleviate a lot of the stigma about mental health and be supportive. And Nick is sitting there in a few of those interviews, rolling his eyes and being a bit snarky. So if you go and rewatch interviews between the two of them, there is already some palpable tension, and he just seems like a giant spoiled brat. So
I'm just going to read this here. It's a 2015 drama film co-written by Nick Reiner. The film is based on Nick Reiner's experiences following heroin addiction and homelessness, and it received negative reviews. Um, and, so this is 10 years ago, which means they probably filmed it 11 years ago, most likely, or somewhere in there. And Nick Reiner doesn't have a lot of other credits for movies. And one wonders, if in some way it's one of these cases of taking out that loss of fame or that loss of success, that inability to make a successful career, on his more successful father, who had a film come out last year, or this year, I should say, 2025 was Rob Reiner's last film. I mean, I don't know anything about it, obviously, but with drug abuse involved, that is a certainly a common circumstance for doing things that are bad, let's just say.
yeah, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the whole thing. It's just so tragic. I mean, especially for Romy, poor girl. There are a couple of clips of her with her father, and one is really funny. She's giving him a haircut, and they're kind of chit chatting, and she was evidently very close to her parents. Their other brother was too. And to discover your father in that position, and she didn't know at the time that her mother's corpse was lying a few rooms away, and then she was told by the arriving police officers. And, she's scarred for life. I mean, she'll never fully recover. How do you from that? And it just, maybe the primary concept that's ticking in my brain is how life can turn on a dime so quickly and so unexpectedly. And on the one hand, it can seem so mundane and predictable and redundant and repetitive. And then it can just flip for better or worse. And obviously, the worst circumstances leave a bigger impression, but you just never know. And I've been there, done that a few times, if not more than a few times. Never to that extreme, of course, but during some pretty extreme circumstances where events can just come out of nowhere and change your outlook and your experience and your life irreparably. So be grateful. It sounds cliche, but it's very true. Be grateful for what you have and know that it can be taken away.
Yeah, and also be grateful for, like you say, when these things happen and someone finds their father murdered, something like that. Just like I've never found a dead body. I've never even seen a car accident. I've barely even seen a lot of blood in my life. I've seen, barely any people around me die beyond old age. Like be grateful for that too. It's kind of a maybe an obvious but overlooked thing that we have is like we're insulated from truly traumatic experiences for the most part, unless they directly happen, to us, which they do happen to a lot of people. But I'm just saying that, like, I'm grateful that they haven't happened to me because I know that that would take a toll on me. I've lost, a good friend at a very young age, and you and I both lost our father at a young age. But beyond that, it's been fairly predictable. We also lost an aunt. But, it's like finding somebody in a state of hyper blood loss, or, finding the aftermath of a grisly car accident, or seeing gunshot wounds. Like I don't want to see this stuff, I really don't. It's not for me. And be grateful, if being grateful for not losing those around you is one thing, but also be grateful for not having trauma if you're someone like me who does not have that type of trauma.
Huh. Yeah, it's just a tragedy, and I wonder how it's going to turn out for Nick. And apparently, he got some. I don't know how he did this, but he got a really acclaimed lawyer as his defense lawyer. But he just seems like the biggest tool. I've heard the way he speaks and watched his sort of snarky retorts in interviews while he's being interviewed with his father, and that's kind of the lamentation now is, oh, there is evidence that he had maybe verbalized to a couple of people that he felt he could never live up. Oh, boo hoo. Yeah, maybe you won't live up to the standards of your father and grandfather, and that must be a heavy burden to carry, but you have been given all the opportunity, all of the resources to at least try. And if you're not going to, and that's how you pay your debt of gratitude for people who have been nothing but supportive of you, I have no sympathy, zero for you. So I hope he gets the worst and most extreme penalty that there is if he is the perpetrator, because allegedly he is. So, on a
Yeah.
brighter note, what are your favorite movies of the late director Rob Reiner?
Well, yeah. So, I want to say, like, it came to me later in life, and I don't know if you've seen it, but this is Spinal Tap, is his first film. He's a writer director. Have you seen it?
No.
Okay, I kind of didn't think so. And while I was while I was thinking of it, I'm not looking at research. I began to really wonder if this is like the first real mockumentary. So this is following the fictional band of Spinal Tap, which are four outrageous characters as they go about, and they're kind of like this pseudo 80s hair metal band that's like pretty bad, and they're just really full of themselves, and they go from concert to concert, and they go to restaurants, and they just kind of like they're just obnoxious and they're ridiculous. They're very fun. It's Michael McKean and Hank Azaria and a bunch of other guys, and um, I had sort of heard the name, and I had only seen it as an adult probably about 10 years ago. And it is really good. Maybe we should do it on the show. But that's a good one. And then, you know what? Also later in life is when I first saw Stand By Me. And I had heard that's another one where I'd heard the name. I sort of knew it was Stephen King, and I knew that it was a bunch of kids. That's all I knew about it. And then I saw it, and I had also been hyped up to where like people were saying like, "Oh, that's a great movie. Stand by Me, Stand by Me." Like I'd heard it my whole life. I see it as an adult. I'm like, you know what? That is a great movie. It's fantastic. It's like a really good coming of age movie about independence and going off on your own and like personal growth. And yeah, have you seen that one?
I saw that one, did not like it very much. Actually, I've never really been one who's moved by coming of age movies. I do remember liking Now and Then, which is incidentally, that one's for girls, probably about the same age. And this one, is it three or four? It's four, right? Young boys. Well,
Yeah,
three applicants. Corey
yeah,
Feldman,
it's
Joaquin Phoenix, and two other ones.
actually, I guess it's five. It's Will Wheaton, River Phoenix, Corey Feldman, and Jerry O'Connor. Oh, that's only four. Sorry. It's four.
Yeah, so Now and Then is like the female equivalent, and I do remember liking that one. My Girl is another kind of coming of age movie. What are some other ones? The Outsiders. But I've kind of become somewhat disillusioned with them. I would have to think more about why and when and how, but I did see that one. Maybe I need to see it again, but was not super impressed, although there was some good acting in it and it had a lot to say. When Harry Met Sally and The Princess Bride are the two that are coming to mind.
Yeah.
And you
So
have
those would
seen
be his.
both.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's all I was going to say. You've seen both. I own When Harry Met Sally, The Princess Bride, of course. We both have a lot of history with that movie. I wonder how
Right.
many times we have actually seen that movie because we grew up watching it. It was on a VHS, if you can remember those, and so we saw it numerous times over the years.
Right. And like that's one of those movies that as a kid I was like, this movie's weird and I like it. It's just kind of like it's very much its own thing. And as I grow older, I grow more appreciation for it. I think it's kind of this really nice mix of like fable and fairy tale and fantasy. And I really do think that as far as the performances and the writing goes, it's just such a perfect example of those three genres where it really takes you to like another land, it's very much perfect in that way. When Harry Met Sally, I rewatched recently. When I saw it the first time, I really liked it. On the rewatch, I liked it a little bit less, but I still really like it. I think it's a really, I just think it's like one of those movies where the characters are so likable and they're so well written that it doesn't kind of matter anything else about the movie. It's like they're just so charming and they're so well written that you can almost just not even care about the plot, not even care about, if it's funny, if it's not funny. I'm not really sure why it didn't work for me as much on a rewatch, but maybe it's just because I liked it so much on the first watch.
I'm pretty picky when it comes to comedies, and those two, yeah, they're both romantic comedies. But Princess Bride is very much its own thing. It's part medieval, part comedy, part fantasy, part love story. Billy Crystal, incidentally, is in both. I don't really like him in Harry Met Sally. He has a very blank presentation. I don't find him funny. He just doesn't do it for me. But I do like Meg Ryan as an actress. In that movie, I think she is astounding. And then I saw her. It's funny because aside from a couple of kind of romantic comedy movies, I don't really have much of an opinion about her. And then I saw her years later in The Cut and thought, oh my God, what happened? What a turn. But when Harry Met Sally, she is very much at her finest. I also think it examines a really interesting question to me, which I'm perpetually analyzing and examining and discussing with people about the platonic male female dynamic. What is your take on that, since we're on the subject, which is very much what that movie is about?
It may sound it may sound a little extreme. I sort of don't think that I don't think that I have the ability to be casually friends with a woman if it's not either something romantically involved or, like family, essentially. I mean, and I don't mean to say like I don't get along with women. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that like if I have a connection to somebody, then I'm gonna start to be romantically interested in them. I'm gonna have at least a little bit of like feelings of desire or feelings of like connection, empathy, um, and so I just don't know how I would balance that with like if I had those feelings, how I would just be casually friends with them. You know what I mean? Like, um, I mean, what about you?
I think for females, yeah, I think it might be a little bit different for males. I think for females, it is largely possible. Just like males can more easily separate sexuality with emotionality, I think women can more easily separate different kinds of emotionality. So we can have an emotional platonic connection to a male or a female, then we can have a romantic emotional connection to a male or a female, depending on which gender you're into. I very much been able to do it. There have been times when it's evolved into more of a romantic situation, but the criteria for me is that there has to be the other person initiating it. And if he doesn't, I'm not going to. So there needs to
Mhm.
be a preemptive show of interest on his part, which then activates any reciprocity on mine. And even if he's physically attractive, if there's never an initiative or blatant and explicit showing of interest, then there won't be on my end either. So I've been able to do it. I actually gravitate largely to male platonic friendships because that, even if it's not a romantic dynamic, it's that tension of a different perspective and a different neurological makeup and different anatomy and different hormones, which just make the dynamic more interesting and more beneficial. And I feel like I receive more insight and more productivity from the influence of male energy.
I went, I guess, pretty much my whole life without really having a female friend until recently. And my first real female friend was an ex-girlfriend, so it's like, there was a history there. We were romantically involved and it didn't work out, but we broke up very amicably. And I truly value her as a friend. I don't really see her because she lives in another state. Um, but it does it really does make me sort of wish that I had had the opportunity more. But I will say, it's still to my point of like, I don't know if I could do it if we hadn't had that relationship. If we met now without having dated, I would just be interested in her because I clearly was at one point and it didn't work. And, you know, um, I do think that the perspective and the everything you're saying, the difference adds to my understanding of people and adds to my understanding of femininity, like if, or whatever. But I still just have never had a situation where I've had like a female friend. And sometimes I really wish that I could, but you know, I don't know.
And does your current partner know about your friendship with this previous girlfriend?
Yeah, yeah, of course. And she's all right with it. And um, we haven't I haven't been with this person for, I guess, almost 4 years. So, we've stood the test of time in terms of like nothing's happened. We haven't relapsed or anything stupid like that. And but I do sense an amount of like, you know, what will this become? And or will this even stick around? Because I I just feel like there's kind of this imbalance, and maybe it's something about what you spoke to with your expect what you expect from your male friends, or how you put kind of the decision on what the relationship is going to be in their hands, where I feel a little bit of like, I don't know how much I'm supposed to be pursuant, how much she's supposed to be pursuant. And so, therefore, sometimes it lays in this weird ground of like, well, who's really calling who and who's doing this thing here? Because if one of us seems too pursuant, then it begins to feel like it is a little bit more of a, yeah, let's rekindle that old thing, maybe,
Yeah, I don't think there is a supposed to necessarily. I do think, and again, I don't know how females even operate in this day and age. I don't have female friends, so you probably maybe you can tell me, but I don't know if women are typically more pursuant or often more pursuant now. For example, in a male female dynamic, they're more likely to make the first move or ask the guy out. So I would, if it's there, I would maybe initiate something if there's chemistry, but it really depends on the signals and the body language and the maybe go ahead signals that you're getting because every situation is different and it might sound cliche, but of course we don't want to jeopardize the friendship and make it subsequently awkward. But The
Right.
Princess Bride is a comedy, a romantic comedy too, but definitely of a whole different nature and very much its own distinct kind of movie. And I've always loved that movie. I think it's really stood the test of time as well.
It's only aged like better and better and better. And I got the good fortune to see it in the movie theater once, on the big screen, not on 35 millimeter, but it was still really cool to see it with a crowd. And the crowd was really into it in Oakland, and that was really awesome. And then he did Misery, which I read the book and then I saw the movie for the first time. So he's repeating a Stephen King, Stand By Me is Stephen King, and now he does Misery, Stephen King. And that won Kathy Bates the Academy Award. And James Caan is like the crippled, well, he gets crippled, but he's the injured author trapped with Kathy Bates, psychopathic fan movie. Did you happen to see that one?
No, I never agree.
I do think it's really good. I think Kathy Bates' performance is just really electric and terrifying and extreme and funny and bizarre, and James Caan is really good. He's very sympathetic. And it goes to what I've often talked about in this podcast, these videos, is like I really like simple story that's dialogue driven, and that certainly is. Now, A Few Good Men, Rob Reiner did, and that's the one with Jack Nicholson and Tom Cruise. You can't handle the truth. Right?
Which one that is? I keep meaning to see it, but I just haven't yet. Demi Moore is also in it, as is Kevin Bacon, I
Mm-hmm.
think.
Yeah, and that's kind of like a political uh, espionage kind of like courtroom drama. Now, we were going to do a bonus episode, which we're still going to do, but we're going to do a bonus episode on just film genres. I have to say, courtroom dramas, just, I don't care. I really don't care. As soon as a courtroom shows up in a movie, I can feel myself like shut down internally.
Not interested in those.
No,
Yeah.
no, I'm like, this one, it's fine. I mean, it's fine. It just is not my genre. I'm not interested in like plaintiff, strike that from the record. I just, whatever. Like, it's just stupid.
Yeah, I'm not interested in them either. I'm trying to think when the last time I even might have seen a prolonged courtroom drama or even such scenes from movies would have been, and they're not my preference either. I feel like they're performative and just very stage oriented, like they're cut from the
Mhm.
same cloth of having been derived from a play that's supposed to be really capitalizing on that tension of the legal elements and the havoc that wreaks on the characters, and that they're extracted from stage kinds of performances and then placed within a movie, and they're supposed to be equally as captivating, and I just can't get into it.
And the other thing about it is, I don't care how basic you find of a courtroom drama. I feel like they rely upon us sort of understanding how legal systems work. And I don't. Even though I've seen like dozens of these movies, I still don't understand why certain things have to be done certain ways in a courtroom. And you can have something happen which ends up twisting something in some way that I don't get because it doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry. Like, why does that change everything? I mean, I understand evidence, but when people don't enter evidence in the right way, and so now the court can't look at the evidence, and it's like, well, it's still evidence. Who cares? I don't know.
Feels Yeah, it feels a bit elite, like it's assuming, that like you need to dumb it down. You need to assume that your audience doesn't have a certain degree in legal terminology, and you can't assume that we do, or that our minds are going to acclimate to that type of lingo. So it seems a bit aloof too. Like there's this presumptuous nature that I'm going to be able to follow the different terms and the evolutions of, right, how evidence is presented and such being a hostile witness and that therefore negating certain testimonies. And no, you need to dumb it down. You need to assume that 99.9% of your audience isn't coming from a legal history or academic background. And if you don't, then I'm just going to check out. So
Right.
I never saw that movie, and maybe I won't now that I know that it's primarily horror and drama. I didn't know much about it, so never
It's
got
like,
around to seeing it.
yeah, it's definitely heavy in that. And Demi Moore's like the sort of the female officer who, is tough but emotional. And I don't know. It's also very tropey. Like it really just follows the tropes of like, what's her character? She's the tough woman who secretly has a soft inside. What's Tom Cruise's character? He's the driven guy who eventually wins the case. What's the military? Well, they're military, so that means they're bad. It's like you can just, it's really not as, there's no depth beyond the initial view. Um,
Right.
so now I'm curious. Rob Reiner did the movie North, and that is one of the least liked films by Roger Ebert of all time. It received a huge backlash and was like well known for being a hated film. Have you ever actually seen it?
No, never even heard of it.
I think that I saw it once when I was very young. I know it has Elijah Wood and it's like some kids movie and he goes on some adventure and I don't remember virtually anything about it, but that was I would almost be interested in rewatching it maybe for this show just because it does have this sort of legacy of being like I think that Roger Ebert's review started with I hate this movie. Hate, 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 hate this movie. Like he's just like this is complete trash. So I don't know. I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, I've never even heard of it, but that's something that Rob Reiner has been given a lot of accolades for. It's not stigmatizing himself into one genre over the other. Stand by Me, Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, A Few Good Men. These movies are all very different from one another, and he was able to do that, and not every director can. You know more about the directorial standpoint or avenue or subject matter than I do. I don't really as well of track as well track of directors and directorial styles and methods and techniques and what directors tend to do which films, but he has been acknowledged by many different outlets as having been one that was versatile and able to do many. So too bad he produced such a unappreciative son who did him in the end, but you just never know, do you?
No, really, exactly. Um, and and North really was kind of a I'm just looking through his filmography. It was kind of the beginning of the end. And it's not like he didn't do movies after that, because he actually, the bulk of his filmography is after North, but I haven't seen any of these. And I'm just going to run through some titles and you can let me know if you've seen any of these.
Sure.
The American President, Ghosts of Mississippi, The Story of Us, Alex and Emma, Rumor Has It, The Bucket List. I've heard of that, but I haven't seen it. Flipped, The Magic of Belle Isle, and So It Goes, Being Charlie, we talked about. LBJ, Shock and Awe, Defending My Life, God and Country, and then we have Spinal Tap 2, The End Continues, which is the film he had that came out this year in September. And that's the end of his filmography.
I've heard of a number of those, but have not seen any of them. So I'd say about a third of the ones you listed I had heard of, maybe more than a third, maybe half even, but have not seen any of them. So I guess I would not have considered myself a huge fan of Rob Reiner because of the movies he's produced. I either haven't seen most of them or I just haven't. So The Princess Bride and Harry Met Sally are two of my favorite movies, which I have seen. And that doesn't really qualify somebody as being one of my favorite directors to any degree or extent, but he did direct those, and I'll always appreciate him for that and for being, from what else I've heard of him, he's been a philanthropist and was a great parent to multiple children and just had a bad seed. Sometimes that happens.
Yeah, right. I mean, and just like you, I haven't seen any of those, and it really comes down to like six movies, that I've seen of his entire filmography, and it's a little low. So I guess I would say, despite being a big name and despite being like a well-known guy, he probably wasn't a top person for me either. But I do think that his successes were so good that you retain that name anyways. And it almost doesn't take more than Princess Bride. Henry Met Sally, When Henry Met Sally is extremely good, but like you almost don't even need that. And you almost don't even need Spinal Tap, and you almost don't even need, well, you definitely don't need A Few Good Men. But like it's kind of amazing how even just one good movie people will remember you for, and they'll have a connection to you with, and that's how impactful Hollywood and film have, you know or how impactful they can be on us. um so yeah, I wasn't aware of any of the drug stuff, the drug use. That to me explains a lot. And the fact he's a little bit younger also explains a little bit. I thought he would have been a little bit older, if only because Rob Reiner was so, I was about to say so old. He wasn't that old, but he was elderly. Um, and those are just situations where you never know what's going to happen. And it's also pretty typical, I will say, for these Hollywood people to have fuck up kids, right? Like, or for someone rich to have a messed up kid. And that's often because they're raised with such wealth. And, money can truly be one of the roots of evil if it happens, just because it gives you access to so much stuff that the rest of us don't have access to.
Yeah, if you look at a lot of examples, Farrah Fawcett and Ryan O'Neal's son is another example of somebody who just, man, he always struggled with substances and did multiple stints in prison by the time he was probably before the age of 30. And so the accessibility, I think living in kind of just living in an otherworldly place where the rules are different for you, and it's almost like living in a cloud of that's disconnected from the mundane kind of survival logistical things that us commoners have to deal with. And some people can appreciate that for what it is and keep it real, keep it real to a point, and some people just never figure out how to do that. And so we don't know. Of course, nobody knows what truly goes on behind closed doors, and maybe that'll come out in court. Um, Maybe there were some dysfunctionalities of the household that were and are, or are and were, however you want to put that together, more extreme and profound and worth considering than we are considering at this point. But I don't know if anything could really deserve the outcome of these two people, and it's just tragic and very unexpected.
Yeah, absolutely. And just so that there's one last thing which I'll say here, which is like, I assumed that the kid would be older because that means Reiner had him approximately at the age of 45. And we are seeing these Hollywood types that are having kids later and later and later, as well as just in society. We're seeing people that are waiting to have kids until they're very old. And I do think that that is generally bad. I can't speak to it in a lot of knowledge, but I just think that in terms of like when we're at our peak performance, energy wise, capability wise, bodily wise, a 46-year-old father who's in his late 60s by the time you're a teenager is not going to be the best dad. And I obviously, like, I don't know anything about them. He could have been a fantastic dad, but I still just think that that's not the optimum age. And again, I don't know what I'm talking about, but you know,
I heard it's funny that you should bring that up because during one of my support groups well, it's not a support group, it's a support for a certain craft that I'm honing and learning how to do. But the leader of that group was talking about how she's having a hard time because she and her husband have struggled with failed in vitro fertilization and maybe it's just not in the cards, not in the planning. And once you stop trying to force a certain outcome is when something can actually take root and come to fruition. And then she mentioned almost as a flippant remark, and I'm 46. Well, there's your problem. I mean, it's
right.
not you're going into all this karmic, energetic, explanations for why something hasn't happened. It's biology. I mean, you're a 46-year-old female. Maybe
Right.
your body isn't producing because it's not supposed to because you're too old. I'm sorry, but people negating biology and this whole ultra feminist perspective that you're never too old to accomplish certain things that are so instinctual and primal and that your body knows when it's best to do and not to do. I don't think that that should be discounted. So there is more leniency for men than for women, but it is worth taking into account that there could be a correlation between problematic and dysfunctional children and the timing of when one chooses to reproduce.
I think so. I think that when we encourage people to have children no matter what, we're doing them a disservice. No one should say, like, "Oh, you're 78 and you're going to have your first kid. Congratulations." No one should be saying that. When Robert De Niro or Al Pacino are having a kid at the age of like 78, like they are now, they're still having kids. People should be like, cart that guy off to the friggin' sanitarium, like you should not be having kids. What are you doing? Um, I just think that we often, as a society, we look at things as we can, and so we should. Technology has figured out how to do this, so therefore we're going to do this. And it's like, just because you can doesn't mean you should do this thing. There are biological reasons that we are unaware of. There is science that we are unaware of. And IVF, among many other things, is one of the things that, like, that should be people should be adopting before they do that. I'm not taking like some anti whatever stance. I don't really care. I'm not going to have kids, so I don't really have an opinion. But I still think that people jump to that kind of stuff and they pay thousands of dollars. And I don't agree that that's what you should do. I just don't.
And I also think that there are certain if you know, or if you're pretty certain that you have certain genetic deficiencies or abnormalities or things that should maybe be at least given some therapy or certain kinds of treatments, and then you're haphazardly reproducing just because you can. I just, I think it's selfish, and I never understood the way that people discount what they could potentially be passing on to kin. And
Mhm.
it's angering to me. And it's this, this dynamic or this situation where people feel like they're not supposed to say anything. Why not? That's an
Yeah.
innocent child that now has a potential genetic deficiency because of something you did. And so this ultra PC way that we've kind of succumbed to of being supportive no matter what. Yeah, I don't think so. Of course, it's best to intervene before the fact, but it's never too late. And if anything, children should be protected, and it's just irresponsible. So, but of course, we don't know the full situation with Rob Reiner, um, and how he raised Nick. I, like I said before, in interviews with Nick, he comes across as very arrogant and very spoiled and very aloof and sarcastic and flippant, and I don't like him. Rest in peace, Rob and his wife. I wish the best for their two remaining children and that things work out as they should.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't mean to sound like I'm trying to blame anyone. I'm certainly not trying to blame Rob Reiner. I'm just speaking to general world views, much like you, that, that I have a opinion on. I obviously don't really have an opinion on this situation other than that it is a tragedy and that I also hope that, whoever's guilty of this gets punished. I believe in punishment, honestly, like, and I don't think that drug abuse is any excuse. I'm sorry, it's not an excuse. And I hope that whoever did this, if it is Nick or somebody else, I hope that they get severely punished. That's all I can say.
How severe do you mean? Do you mean indefinite malicious flogging in the county jail, or do you mean the death penalty, or what exactly do you have in mind? You don't have to say, but
Well, no, I mean in general, I take the stance, obviously we have put people to death for crimes they didn't commit, but even with that, I am still pretty much pro death penalty. I don't have opinions on most, including this. I don't have opinions on most cases individually because I'm truly not involved other than being a member of society. But I do think that it is a situation of if there is hard evidence and if we can prove that you did it, I'm like you had your chance. All you had to do was not kill somebody. That's not that hard. Plenty of us don't kill people. Um, so, yeah, I mean, just personally, I am pro death penalty. Yeah.
yeah. Well, we'll see how things work out. We'll see how things work out. It's what a case. Um, you just never know in light of this holiday season. Count your blessings and what you do have, because the very next day your house could go up in flames as it did for those poor people in the Palisades, or your son could turn out to be a sociopathic homicidal maniac, and you never knew. So if you are not afflicted with such tragedies, then consider yourself lucky, because nobody can see that type of thing coming. Obviously, they didn't. Rob and his Michelle was her name, I hope. Rob and his wife, they were at home and asleep at the time, from what I've heard. And if they believed that their son was any type of threat to that extent, then he wouldn't have been housed up in their guest house. He lived on their property at the time, and they just kept trying, even into his early to mid 30s. They kept trying to help him and were supporting him. And look how that turned out.
Yeah. It is tragic. Yeah.
Yep. Well, with that being said, hopefully the next episode will be a little bit lighter, but we did want to just pay tribute to these two individuals who were taken too soon, but who did leave. I don't know as much about his wife. I know that she was noted photographer. That's how they met. It was on set. But Rob Reiner, you produced two of my favorite movies, and I'll always appreciate you for that. And from what I know, you were kind-hearted. Your other two children speak very well of you, and I'm sorry that you had such a nutcase as your third and youngest kid. I think Nick was their youngest, but he'll get
Yeah,
his due time. That's all we can hope for.
yeah.
Hear those
And
sirens? That's very appropriate as a way.
I just wanted to repeat what you said as the final word, so I'll just say, yeah, thank you, Rob Reiner.
Yep. And we will see you soon here on Hipsterless Hangout.